Hi, this is Tim of the 1916 Company. Welcome and thanks for logging on. Every watch you see in this show is in stock and for sale. So reach out to me personally, Team Mosso at the1916company.com for purchase pricing and availability questions concerning this or any of the watches on today's show. We're going to start with one of the few Omegas for which the modern reference number is widely remembered. This is the famed Seamaster Diver 300 meter 2531.80.00, the watch that made the Seamaster an all-timer. Not that it wasn't already as a model line, but there was no really enduring Seamaster design before this one bowed back in 1993. Now, 2 years later, it soared to fame on the wrist of Pierce Brosnan during his turn as 007. Now, GoldenEye, which I guess came out 30 years ago this year, featured the quartz version of this watch, but for the last 3 turns as 007, he wore the mechanical chronometer. What makes this one special is that it has an original factory tritium dial, plus it just came back from a full factory service, so it has service warranty on it, and everything is as fresh as can get for a watch that is now pushing 3 decades. On my wrist, you can see the size was always very well matched to male tastes in the day. Bigger than the Submariner, but not big. It was a watch that wore thinner than any modern Omega Seamaster at about 12 millimeters thick. These pre-coaxials are a bit of a wonder compared to how large they are today. It's described often as a 41, though in fact it's more of about a 41.5. And from end link to end link, the total distance across the wrist is 53.3 millimeters. So on the wrist back in the 90s, this would have looked quite a bit larger than even a Sea Dweller. It was designed to be about one size class up from the popular Rolex divers. One place where it also exceeded the Rolex watches at the time was with a clasp that was a lot more solid. Solid end links, solid center links, robust construction, thick gauge steel, a folding clasp with a twin trigger release, not a thin clamshell, and an extension that was machined from substantial pieces of stainless steel, just like the clasp. This was a sea change, pun intended, for dive watches. 120 click bezel, 300 meter water resistance, and it'll still meet that today. So this was a diver back in its day, but it's not so old that it cannot continue to be used that way. Helium escape valve for the 1% of 1% of 1% of you watching this who are saturation certified divers. You know who you are. That's there to prevent the helium from blowing the crystal and the seals out of your watch. For everyone else, I think James Bond used this as a detonator in his turn as 007. So on the dial, we've got 2 different things. One, we've got the original dial base, which is the famed Omega Wave matte blue with a genuine tritium patina. This is not fauxtina, but when the watch went back to the factory, the original hands had marks on them, and the original bezel pearl was scratched. So the bezel insert in the hands are modern superluminova units. I'll show you lights out. This is still a very functional watch from a hand and bezel legibility standpoint, but almost immediately the dial, because it is tritium loomed, starts dying out. You can still see the hands, you can still see the bezel pearl, so you can still use the watch. So in some ways it's the best of both worlds. It's still usable in the dark, but you keep the original tritium dial. I believe because this one has a 60 million serial number, we're looking at a rare overlap of a tritium dial and a caliber 1120 inside. So 44-hour power reserve, chronometer certified, automatic, quick set and hacking. It's a tough, fine automatic, customized for Omega by ETA from the 2892A2 base. It includes 2 extra jewels, a little bit more power reserve, and finer finish. That's what makes it the Omega 1120. Okay, this watch is probably one of my 3 all-time favorite Audemars Piguet timepieces. And if you're wondering what the other ones are, well, they would be the Tourbillon Automatique from the 1980s, the bumper automatic Tourbillon by Maurice Grimm. And then also, I would say, because I am a sap about such things, the original Platinum Royal Oak Perpetual Calendar. Now combine that with one of these and you've got the ultimate Audemars Piguet collection. So this is the Millenary Star Wheel, released in the year 2000, 125 pieces in steel to celebrate 125 years of Audemars Piguet, which actually becomes 150 years this year. They wanted to remind you that Audemars Piguet is the oldest continuously family-owned and run Swiss watchmaker. So you have the Star Wheel system that AP first introduced on the 1991 Star Wheel. And that's also in my top 10 of Audemars Piguet watches. But you can see how it works. There's this beautifully decorated carousel featuring 3 discs of sapphire, each with 4 hours. 3 discs times 4 hours, that's 12. Then we have these jumper springs, these pawls that index these polished steel wheels. So those are the star wheels. It's a wandering hours complication, like a Renaissance era clock. That's where this comes from. So you're looking at 10. Now you're looking at 10:15. Now you're looking at 10:30. The outgoing hour disappears at the bottom. The oncoming hour rotates into position up at the top. It is a beautiful pirouette. The module by Audemars Piguet is known as the 2811. The base caliber, which they call the 2224, is a Jaeger-LeCoultre 889, so a properly high horology automatic base back from a period when AP owned 40% of JLC. It made sense to use a JLC base. That is a tradition that dates back to the 1870s, when LeCoultre was a prolific provider of a Bausch to Audemars Piguet. So the automatic base provides a 38 to 40 hour power reserve, beats at 4 hertz. There is a hacking function, though there's no seconds, so the watch will stop, but it won't be immediately apparent. It's a 5-position adjusted movement with 31 jewels that features a great deal of hand decoration, including fired blued screws. So while you can't see the movement inside, rest assured it is up to the task. Now the watch is small and easy to wear, so even a lady or a person like me with a smaller wrist can really enjoy it. It's 41 millimeters wide, that is from 9 o'clock to 3 o'clock, not including the crown. It's only 8.9 millimeters thick because that JLC base is quite thin at 3.25 millimeters. And then from lug tip to lug tip, those welded and hand-finished lugs are 43 across the wrist. So this is a really easy watch to wear on a wrist as small as 13.5 centimeters. This is a very versatile watch. There was a rose gold version of this, I think made in 75 pieces that year, and then there was a very rare Star Wheel pocket watch in platinum. But of the 125th anniversary AP Star Wheel watches, this is the most desirable. Also, take note, 2000 was E-Series 24,000, so if you, like me, are a connoisseur of AP serial numbers, this is a great way to have a firm data point, or datum. So you know 24,561 was made in the year 2000. Let's talk about something crazy from the 2000s. A lot of people think Bulgari created this octo shape. Nope, it was Gerald Genta. Hourglass, a East Asian retailer, purchased Gerald Genta and Daniel Roth, which shared one Valet du Jeu factory, back in the mid-1990s. And by the end of the 1990s, they were ready to bail. They were in over their heads, sales were falling. They were not a manufacturer, and they had to admit they could not run 2 watch companies. So the sale to Bulgari was completed in, I believe, about 2000, and so Bulgari inherited all of the Gerald Genta designs, including the Octo case. Now, in 2004, the Octo as we know it today debuted on the Octo by Retro, and in 2006, the Arena Quattro Retro arrived as a round case with quadruple retrogrades, and the Arena Quattro, and I'll show you how this works, but the Arena Quadra retrograde became the Octo Quadra retrograde chronograph after that. So 2000, Bulgari buys Gerald Genta. 2004, the Octo by Retro. 2006, the Arena Quadra Retro. And then after that, this watch. In 2010 and 2011, this would be rebranded Gerald Genta by Bulgari, and then Gerald Genta would go away for the better part of a decade before its revival in 2019. But enough about that. Let's talk about what you get. This is a monstrous watch in red gold, and you can see the original Octo case in Gerald Genta fetal with an onyx cabochon on a lovely beaded crown. We've got a dial that incorporates champlavé, so the dial has been scooped out to create wells into which the lacquer is filled, and then alternately applied in white, black, and clear layers and hand-polished, heat-cured after each stage to create this glossy champlavé lacquer. We have 4 retros, so the Quadra Retro, we have the date, we have the minutes, we have the chronograph minutes, and we have the chronograph hours. Now, of course, this uses a Frédéric Piguet 1185 chronograph base, so on top of that, we have the Gerald Genta jump hour, retrograde minute, retrograde date complication, and then a Dubois de Praz double retrograde chronograph complication. So this is, at its lowest level, Gerard Perregaux, then Gerald Genta, then atop that, Dubois de Praz. Taking a look at how the mechanism works, it's a lot of fun to just play with the retrograde display for the minutes and the hour. And then we have centrally running chronograph seconds. And don't be scared here. It's supposed to do this. It retrogrades, or I should say it flies back when you reset it, down to 0, which is at the bottom of the dial. So you see 30s at the top, 0s at the bottom. Vertical clutch chronograph and a column wheel, so it's crisp to the touch, and it glides into action without any jump or stagger. We all know that column wheels make for crisp actuation and vertical clutches make for seamless engagement. But vertical clutches also make for less wear and tear on the mechanism. So if you want to just leave the chrono running so you have something living and animated on the dial, you can absolutely do that. Another thing that's kind of fun here is that because the watch retains the underlying mechanisms of the 1185 base, check this out, there is a quick set on an 1185. So you do have a quick set for the retrograde date, which sits down at 6 o'clock. So if you want to play with the date and retrograde it, you can absolutely do so. Lots of fun to be had there. Surprisingly, all of this is 100 meters water resistant, and it comes with the king of single fold clasps. Look at this. It's got a radial spring, just like Patek Philippe uses. It's much more secure when closed than a typical friction fit clasp for that reason. It's substantial. There's polish. There's satination, there's engine turning, and then the engine turning recurs on the gold gilded movement. Now, they call this the GG 7800, which, as we've already established, is a Frédéric Piguet 1185 with a Gerald Genta by retrograde jump hour with a Dubois de Praz double retrograde chronograph module. So it's a great looking movement. You can see the bevels mirrored and rounded and gorgeous. Everything's been gold gilded and then engine turned. So there's engine turning on the bridges as well as the rotor, and it's called the old gold or potter's gold treatment, which looks fantastic. All screws are polished. You can see the column wheel is visible. So is the balance. It's automatic winding. It's got a 40-hour reserve. 5-position adjusted, 37 joules just for the base movement, a real high horology movement inside a high horology watch. Now, the factory straps, very available. For years, Bulgari has been supplying straps to both Gerald Genta and Daniel Lecoultre owners, and that was before the brands were revived. Remember, LVMH owns all of them today, Bulgari, Gerald Genta, and Daniel Lecoultre. So today, because there's huge money behind these brands, you'll be able to get any part you need and any service you need for Gerald Genta and Daniel Lecoultre watches made before the brands were retired. But like I said, the brands are back, so it's not even like these are no longer going concerns. But this is one from the previous era, after Genta left, but before LVMH bought in. A really neat piece. A lot of watch, though. I got to admit, if you don't have a huge wrist, my wrist is 16 centimeters. If you don't have a huge wrist, this is not going to work. Figure 18 centimeter circumference wrist bare minimum to make this viable. That said, if you have a smaller wrist, I've got something for you. Slightly over 42 millimeters in diameter, just over 11 millimeters thick and made of titanium and sapphire. This is the 2022 to present Ressence Type 8. So this was designed to be a more accessible Ressence piece with their no crown layout, case back setting and winding, automatic base, and of course their regulator style Orbital Convex system time display. So you can see how this works. Everything rotates relative to its own axis, but also relative to the center of the dial. So what are we looking at right here? Well, you can see we are looking at 60 minutes and 11 o'clock. So that's how it works. The watch is incredibly light on the wrist and friendly and approachable and superbly luminescent with that incredible convex dial that is made of blue titanium. On the reverse side, you could see how this could be wound or set using the reversing case back. And then on the wrist, it's as light as a feather, easy to read, intuitive, comfortable, and suitable to fit under even the tightest cuffs, especially with the slope of the case flank. It's also short across the wrist. You can see it's got a sort of lenticular lugless profile that makes it really easy to wear, even on a wrist as small as 13.5 centimeters circumference. So a lady could absolutely wear this. And a great way to get into Ressence watchmaking, Belgian design, Swiss built, for a lot less money than you'd spend even on a Type 1. Automatic base, ETA 289282, 36-hour power reserve, and it is automatic winding, though you can wind it with the case back by reversing it through the tactile friction zones. A rubber strap, which I love, and one thing I also love about Ressence straps is, even though this is a conventional perforated pin buckle strap, compare it to a normal strap, and look how much more adjustable range there is on the Ressence strap than there is on a standard strap. Look how many more options they give you and how much more closely spaced they are so you don't wind up stuck between sizes. Just another example of why Ressence, a company founded by Benoit Mintiens, an industrial designer, they always take design to heart. Speaking of independent brands, now we're going a little bit more upscale, but people who take design and decoration to heart, they don't come much better than Tim and Bart Gronelfeld of Oldenzaal in the Netherlands. After a celebrated career that included work under Robert Greubel at Audemars Piguet, Renault, et Papi in the 90s, the Gronefelds founded their own brand in the 2000s, and in 2018, for the 2019 model year, they launched this, the 1941 Principia. So the watch is their first auto, and it uses the 1941 case, which is 39.5 and thus a lot more approachable for many people. The lugs are less than 47 millimeters across, and the watch is about 10.5 millimeters thick, so it's a very wearable watch. This dial has a solid silver base, but the treatment, these are highly customizable. The treatment here is called cream lacquer. The case is red gold, and then you see the little orange 60 to remind you that the Gronefeld brothers are in fact Dutch. The hands are fired blue, and then on the back, you have a movement that's based on an Andreas Streller architecture, but it's properly sized for a modern case. This is the G06, and it's decorated to a standard that the Gronefelds call their own. The bridges are all steel. A couple of reasons for that. One, it's impressive to hand-finish stainless steel, but there's also durability. They found back when they worked in service that a lot of bridges would get warped from inept handling and rough handling. Steel is a lot harder to warp. Also, steel doesn't have to be plated to be corrosion resistant. Plated bridges, if they get scratched, it can be an ordeal to replate them, especially at the service level. And if bridges have Côte de Genève on them, if you scratch a Côte de Genève bridge, you can't simply refinish it. You got to scrap it. So using their own distinctive finish, they found a way to decorate beautifully, but also make it possible to repair the decoration. So they use 3 types of decoration that can be reapplied. Media blast to the center, a satin brushed channel along the edge, and then a mirrored bevel on the absolute flank of each bridge. So all those things can be reconditioned if disfigured. Automatic winding, you can see ceramic bearings, a quadruple finish, 22-karat rotor, and 56-hour power reserve, 3 hertz beat rate, free sprung with a full balance bridge. And look how they skeletonized the bridge. The base plate is nickel anthracite coated, so it's the same color as the steel. And there's some fun elements going on here, including architecture, which relates not so much to finish, but the shape, proportion, and relative to position of the pieces. Look at all these bridges. They're designed to look like the bell gable roofs of traditional Dutch houses. It's a 6-position adjustment, so one more than a standard chronometer. Look at the little golden chaton pivot cups for the jewels, the way a pocket watch would have been constructed. Jewel into cup, then cup into bridge. Look at the solarization at the center of the winding rotor with the mirror finish outboard of it, and the solarization on the barrel cover, the black polish with chamfered slots in circumference of each screw, and the unique double spoke design used for the wheel train. There's a lot of original and innovative watchmaking here. And you can see on the wrist it wears beautifully. This is a unisex option. This is not necessarily for men, not necessarily for women. What I will say is that it's on the more formal end of 1941 Principias with alligator leather strap, red gold case, and a cream dial. You could get this with a blue dial, a python strap, and a steel case, and it would be much sportier. So if you want something traditionally elegant from the Gronefelds, you can't buy it from them because they've closed their order book. But from us, this is available now. You can also see the incredible sculpting of their case, the hollows of the lugs, the fluting of the top, the sharp break with the case band, the concave bezel that swells at 12 and 6 o'clock. The watch is just rich with nuance. Be perfectly honest, so is this, but in a very different way. So Jaeger-LeCoultre originally launched a version of this complication, the perpetual calendar with Tourbillon, back in 2009. They refined the case and the dial and made both a lot more appealing. For 2013, the Jubilee year that you can see on the dial, 180 years of Jaeger-LeCoultre. It started as LeCoultre, and then in the 30s it became Jaeger-LeCoultre. But this is a 180-piece limited edition in platinum, and don't laugh, but this is its full name: Jaeger-LeCoultre Master Grande Edition Tourbillon cylindrique à quantième perpétuel. It is an absurdly long name. I call it the MGT, Master Grand Tradition, and you can too. So the Tourbillon cylindrique features a cylindrical hairspring. And you can see it is a genuine blued chronometer style helical hairspring a la John Arnold. And if an overcoil is good for isochronous timekeeping in different positions, a cylindrical hairspring is even better. You can also see this is now a flying tourbillon with no upper bridge to block your view and incredible depth, the lower dial cut away so you can see this hand-finished 1-minute flying tourbillon. You can also see that the balance wheel is free-sprung for precise adjustment. What you can't see is that it's optimally crafted of a 14-karat gold alloy that improves timekeeping. That's not possible to do in mass production, but on a watch like this, it is. The dial features a lovely granular frosted finish and the IWC Kurt Klaus mechanically programmed perpetual calendar. Everything is set from a single point of adjustment. Look at the welding of those lugs to the case flank and the differential finish between polish and satin, as well as the fluting of the lug profile. It's 42 millimeters in diameter, 13.3 millimeters thick, and about 48.7 from lug tip to lug tip, so it really is quite easy to wear. 48-hour power reserve, and perhaps the surprise here is that it is an automatic winder with a durable automatic winding system, ceramic bearings, unidirectional winding action. You can see that there's a protective sticker here, so everything is just a little bit dulled, but the decoration right down to the mirrored beveling, it's quite impressive. Screws are blued and polished. They have both types, and you can see a 22-karat gold mass that features sharp interior angles where the hollows are beveled, and then this image of the gold medal won by Jaeger-LeCoultre at the 1889 Paris Universal Exhibition. So that's what's going on right there. This is a limited edition of 180 pieces celebrating 180 years of Jaeger-LeCoultre perpetual calendar, flying tourbillon, cylindrical hairspring, and a moon phase. All of this on the wrist, surprisingly wearable. Like I said, the original version of this watch that came out in 2009 had a much bigger and less elegant case, and while some people like the wrist presence of the bigger watch, I find this both more elegant and more wearable. I can wear this. I can't really wear the original Master Grand Tradition. Just a wonderful piece, and that dial is to die for. So, if you're interested in the Jaeger-LeCoultre Master Grande Tradition Tourbillon Cylindrique à Quantième Perpétuel, and you're paying by the word, you're going to get a great value. Reach out to me, Team Mosso at the1916company.com for this one. But it's not the last watch of the show. No, that is this. One of the best sounding minute repeaters ever made in the entire history of the minute repeater. This is the 20-piece grade 5 titanium 40 millimeter flying tourbillon minute repeater with Grand faux enamel from H. Moser & C. In 2022, they launched 20 of these in grade 5 tie and 20 of these in rose gold. It is the Endeavour Concept Minute Repeater Tourbillon. The dial is a piece, let's get closer to my light source here. The dial is a piece of white gold with a hammered texture that's then had 4 separate blue pigments applied to create this aqua gradient fade. So it's a fume fade, but it's done in vitreous glass-based paint or enamel. Then you have a tourbillon, a 1-minute tourbillon. It's a flying tourbillon like the JLC with no upper bridge to block your view. Moser making the escapement, the hairspring, and the balance in-house. The detailing on the tourbillon being exquisitely well finished. Now take a look at the strikers and their bridges. This is a level of decoration you don't get from Moser, so you can already tell something's up here. This movement was developed in conjunction with Pascal Favre of MHC. Now, he passed away during COVID, but the influence of MHC on the decoration of this movement takes it to a level you will not see on any other Moser watch. Look at these interior angles. It's not just that they are interior angles, it's that they're extraordinarily good ones. Not all interior bevels are created equal. Look at this steel bridge mirrored on its top and then fully rounded bridges at the edge, like it's some sort of Grubel 4C double tourbillon 30 degree. Then you've got Moser's distinctive double-crested Côte de Genève in a movement that perfectly fills this case. And that's before we even fire up the repeater in a titanium case with a slide that operates on Teflon. It is creamy to activate and devastatingly appealing to the ear. This is both one of the loudest and the best sounding repeaters I've ever encountered from any brand. Christophe Claret and Patek Philippe have nothing on this watch. I might have missed the 14th minute there. I said it as close as I can to 12:59. By the way, in spite of the flying tourbillon, 90-hour power reserve. Very thin at under 14 millimeters thick and short across the wrist. So you can see on my wrist, this is an easy watch to wear. And incredibly, despite the protests from many that you can't make a great sounding minute repeater with a water resistant case, this one does have standard 30-meter water resistance. So you've got a lot going on here. You've got an everyday durable watch with finish worthy of the best of Greubel 4C de Bethune or Gerard Perregaux. You've got the flying tourbillon with a 90-hour reserve, and you've got that peerless minute repeater in a movement that is truly distinctive. And again, if you love Moser, but you think some of the pieces are finished more to a JLC or an IWC standard, this is a way to get a watch that gets you everything that's great about Moser, right down to the total lack of any Swiss origin or name branding, because this watch is made almost entirely, over 95% in Switzerland. This is that distinctive Endeavour case. You can see the case back is curved and cambered, including the sapphire, that the case hollows are evacuated and mirror polished, that the bezel is concave all the way around, ebbing and flowing at swells at 12 o'clock and 6. This is just a sexy watch. And then there's the machine inside and the enamel dial. So reach out to Team Mosso at the 1916company.com for purchase and pricing details.